Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of the Indie Initiative here on Insider Gaming. I'm your host, as always, Mike Straw, and today I am joined by lead programmer, designer of Cross Blitz at Tako Studios, Tom Ferrer. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, for those that don't know, I like to start this off of in your elevator pitch. What is Cross Blitz?
Cross Blitz is primarily an RPG deck builder. So you play, like in our demo, you play as Redcroft, the mighty pirate, and you're on a quest to win back your freedom. And you'll play on like a hex node map, and you'll do battles, etc. Very similar to any sort of RPG that you've ever seen, except there's card battles instead of the normal sort of menu fights.
So with it being a deck builder, it popped up the demo during Steam Next Fest. This is obviously recording coming out after Steam Next Fest, but it's still available to download the demo on Steam. Being a deck builder, like it has that unique element, RPG deck builder game, but deck building games have kind of really been popular the past maybe 5 to 10 years. I mean, it really started, like it got a resurgence back a decade ago with Hearthstone, and it's just constantly evolved. So knowing the market you were coming into, what were you thinking about how you were going to stand out?
So when we first started development in 2019, it wasn't as popular, right? So I think now going forward, right, like you see all these deck builders come out as we're developing this game, we're like, oh shit, that's not good. But I honestly think our game stands out anyways. We put a lot of polish into it, just the art direction itself, the story. I mean, Phil's done just such an incredible job with like taking these characters and like really fleshing them out. Like it's just a really fun RPG at its core, and then you have this deck builder on top of it. So you see a lot of deck builders nowadays, and it's like, okay, this is a roguelike. I think pretty much every deck builder indie comes out as a roguelike, which makes sense technically, right? Because it's a lot easier to build. I mean, this took us forever. But our game is sort of this mix between this like Yu-Gi-Oh magic and RPG elements combined into one. So you kind of get rid of the free-to-play aspect of like all of the junk that is Hearthstone and all Yu-Gi-Oh and all these things, and then you combine it with like this like cool story. So putting it all together, I think it is pretty unique.
With the one thing, as soon as I was brought up the game and then got my hands and was able to play it, the thing that I fall in love with games is art style. And that is one of the, in my mind, the nicest aspects, like when you first load, before even getting into it, that you'll notice right away. What went into that process of how you wanted the game to look?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's just Phil doing Phil stuff. He's just so good and so talented. Like he's just good at what he does. Like you sort of have to ask him maybe his process. But in terms of just like getting it all integrated, it just, I would just be like, okay, this is kind of like what I put the design doc together, and he just, create a masterpiece.
Yeah. So you just let the master do his thing and just
exactly.
Like, okay, I know it's going to be good.
Yeah, let him cook. Yeah.
So the gameplay itself, when you're in the game, at least from time with the demo, it's very gameplay focused. Like there's these little small cutscenes in between fights. You're not really sitting there waiting. Was that obviously by design? But what went into that process of like, all right, we want to be able to tell this story, but we don't want to overindulge or not water it down, but weigh it down with all these cutscenes in between battles. Like, how do you find that balance between enough and too much?
A lot of editing. I mean, I think Phil's gone through, because he wrote it all. He's gone through the story, and just he went through every single cutscene, and it's like, I'm like, it's a little too long. Like, it feels a little too long. Okay, let me cut it down. It's like, I need to get this information across. How do we do this in the most concise way possible? And I mean, we're still doing that, you know, like we don't want it to drag. And we see, you know, when you see streamers playing it, you can see their fatigue, you know, on some of the cutscenes, and you're like, okay, we got to cut that one, you know, we got to cut this, we got to cut that. I mean, it's all just very much just polish and just going over it 100 times.
So before getting into the gameplay itself, you mentioned seeing streamers. How often are you guys bouncing around looking? Like, are you lurking just to see what people are saying, or how are you guys doing that?
Always lurking. Yeah. I've seen every single stream or video that is Cross Blitz like a lot of times. Yeah.
So sure. How hard is it to not jump in when you see someone, if someone like in their stream is like, oh, this is just too long. Yeah. And you just go comment, you know, get bet, do it yourself. How do you,
I mean, yeah, I take it always as like feedback that's good. And like, we always try to change things to, because yeah, you see that stuff and it's not really something that I'm like ashamed about or like, you know, take to heart. It's just like, okay, this is just not good. Like we gotta fix this thing, right? There was a couple battles in the demo that like people were not able to like get past, right? Because like, you know, I've been working on this game for 3 years. I'm pretty good at it. So it's like when people make mistakes and stuff, you can't really fault them for it. They just don't know how to play. And so you're just like, okay, I need to go back and tweak this battle. I want it to be easier. In general, I think the story mode should be easier, right? Should be, you know, shouldn't take a lot of effort to get through.
So in the gameplay itself, it's a minion card battle.
Yeah.
Played with the cards. You have 2 rows of minions attacking the opposite side each round. And the goal is obviously the strategy is building up. I mean, you throw your front, you have your stronger minions up front so they can take the damage if need and damage attack. How did you go about designing the fighting mechanics and the actual gameplay, not loop, but just the gameplay elements and getting to how you want these battles to play out?
Yeah, I mean, it started out as like a paper prototype back in 2019 of just me kind of messing around. Like I really liked the idea of you're not able to sort of control where your minion goes. It's like just straight. So you have these like lane-based battles. And it just kind of went from there. Like there was a lot of influence from like Yu-Gi-Oh, Hearthstone, Magic, like just to take some elements of like what I loved about card games. And I've been an avid card game player for like, as a kid, I played Yu-Gi-Oh almost every day. And then when Hearthstone came out, I was, you know, in college, but it's like, this was like the magical world of like, oh my God, I can play a card game on my phone and it's like super good. So at that point, I just like, that's just all I wanted to build, right? I wanted to build a card game. And, you know, we started out as like a smaller mobile thing with Candies and Curses. And then, you know, when we finally kind of got our footing together, we made Tako Boy Studios. I was like, okay, I think we should just build this card game. And, you know, it was going to be small. Of course, it was going to be tiny, tiny little card game. And it turned into this giant.
It never stays tiny. It was like the 5th or in this short run of this show, you're about the 5th or 6th person to go, oh, it was just going to be the small, tiny thing that just the 2 of us I'm just working on. And then like a month later or 2 months later, whatever, it turns into this. Well, I guess we're building a whole full release. So that's happening now. Our lives are over.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
With the game and with any card builder and deck builder game, you always run into that issue of a meta becoming the go-to, and then it's overpowered. And it kind of, I mean, it's personally, I'll be honest, it's turned me off to so many games in the past because
100%.
You get that meta and you run into it nonstop, and then you feel, well, I have to follow a meta, otherwise and it takes away that fun of trying out different things. How are you guys going about? Obviously, there's ultimately people are going to find a meta, but how do you go about encouraging these people and players to try different things and don't always just stick with what works?
So, you know, you bring up a good point. Yeah, you're right. It's like people are always going to find a meta. There's always going to be the strongest thing. There just has to be, right? It's just how it works. But we do encourage, you know, different play styles based on the enemies that you fight. So a lot of the enemies will counter, you know, maybe an aggro deck, right? Because playing pirates down is easy, right? It's like boom, 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 like aggro pirate, like, okay, I kill you. So we'll build in basically things to counter that. So people have to go in and sort of, build another deck. As far as like going into like, PvP or like other things, like we do have archetypes, and those are very clear in the level tree.
Yeah.
So each archetype has very distinct mechanics, and those mechanics are, I mean, just really fun. I love almost all of the archetypes, like a lot, right? So it's like to encourage sort of like it's more fun versus, hey, you need to do the strongest thing. Now, I don't know. It's like, will people just gravitate to the strongest thing? Probably. And I'm not really sure like totally how to solve that. But in terms of like play styles, I mean, we have 5 different factions, which are like heroes. And those factions all have 4 like archetypes, and they're all super different, but like sort of stay in the theming of that faction. So there's like tons of stuff to do, like super fun, weird, wacky mechanics in the game.
So with the game, one of the mechanics are blitz bursts.
Uh-huh.
How did you go about designing these? Like, their effects that, for those watching that, and correct me if I misdescribe them. You work towards them, you as you're going on in your match, to basically like an ultimate, I guess you could say, for some people to better understand it.
Yep.
What went into deciding those and adding that as a functionality? Was that just another way of how to make the game different, or did it come out of nowhere?
I mean, literally, you said ultimate, and that's literally where we got it. It's the limit. It's the limit break of this game, right? We want to get the RPG stuff in there, right? We really wanted that Final Fantasy feel. Like, we want people to feel like they have something like that. So that's exactly what we did. We built in a sort of ultimate system, right? And that's the Blitz Burst. Like, okay, a condition, and then you get this like powerful effect.
Overall, I know the game, it's single player only, and that kind of would help the meta idea, because at the end of the day, you're not dealing with players playing against each other. And it's just, was going single player kind of just the way of, this is how we're going to get the game we want out, so people can get used to it and we can build the story we want and all the features we want? Or went into the, because everybody has a different reason of why they have the features they have.
Yeah, so this is like a long, I mean, it's not a long story, but it turned into like sort of this. So when I initially designed the game, right, I handed the design doc over to Phil. It was a PvP like Hearthstone game, like full of, free to play, in-app purchases, all of that, right? Because we were mobile developers before this. And then we'd still worked as contractors. So Dan Fernacey, Rivals of Ether guy, he contacted us and he said, hey, like, will you make me a card game? We're like, oh, we're making a card game too. Like, we would love to like help you with that. So we, helped him design the card game, put it out, published it, free to play, all the bells and whistles, all the mechanics of a free to play game. And honestly, I was just like, I'm so over designing things like this. Like, it felt, I don't know, it's like you lose a lot of like the fun of the game because you have to put in these mechanics, right? Because you have to make money. And so, and I don't fault anyone for doing this, because
it sucks, because it does take away. It's like, I have this vision, but at the same time, you need to make money somehow.
Yeah.
So
you got to make it a little shittier. Yeah. So it's like it's not something that like I wanted to do after that. So I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, let's just do like a single player game. PC, like, mobile sucks. So we like totally revamped it. We decided on 5 heroes, and each was going to have their own story, and it just built out from there. It got bigger and bigger and bigger.
So with the game, there's over 200 cards that you'll be able to collect and build decks with and things like that. Obviously, you've mentioned Phil a lot, who's your partner. Did he design and come up with every single one of them, or did you come up with the mechanics behind the cards or ideas in that?
Yeah, so the way that it works is like, I'll come up with like the character, right? Like, okay, this is like, flesh-eating giant or whatever. He eats things to gain power, whatever, like some random thing like that. And then he'll take that idea and then say, okay, here's your flesh-eating giant, right? Like, and he gives it, the pass, the cool pass. But yeah, so I'll design all the cards. Sometimes Phil will help, he'd be like, oh, this would be cool. And I'll be like, it's a great idea. So like we'll go back and forth, but mainly it's like 90%. Like, yeah, I'll design the cards, the archetypes, and get it all ready. Give him a list, and then he'll get all the card art for me.
So the game is in early access currently. There's the demo available. People can add to their wish list. Do you have any idea or inkling of when you actually want this to get out? Obviously, there's plans, there's desires, and things like that. But what can you say about the actual full release?
The full release. So the early access will be sometime this year. It's kind of all I can give. And then the 1.0 is sort of like whenever early access is good to go. Like we're super happy with it. So it's like, because we want every single character, because every character has their own 3-chapter story, which is like 6 hours of gameplay per character. So we want each of those characters to get their own release, right? We want them to feel like big events. So we'll go ahead and push those out over time. Plus we'll do Tusk Tales, which is our roguelike mode. And so, after we feel like it's gonna be, it's like really solid, then we'll do the 1.0. And hopefully if it's successful, we will, push it onto like Switch and other consoles and stuff.
So what you're saying is, to everybody who's going to listen and read the article on this, play the game, buy the game, make it successful so we can release it to more people, because that was one of the questions you mentioned, the Switch, and these games just seem to do really well on the handheld console. It just, everybody asks about it. So it's obviously always that. But Nintendo, obviously from experience and from talking with others, Nintendo doesn't make it super easy.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they don't.
But it's one of those things of people are going to ask for it. People are going to ask for features like multiplayer, but I know like it's probably something you guys have thought of. But is there any getting to 1.0 is obviously the main goal of getting all these chapters and stories created, correct? It's not something that's currently in your mind.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's like getting all these things done. So we have 3 of them already done. Like they're great, they're fun, super fun. All of them thematically just so different. Like Violet is a pop star and goes through like these like different different waves of like Battle of the Bands and things like that. So you'll get a lot of like music influence and stuff, and that's where like Caesar, the Cactus Bear, and then the Fat Bard, our audio guys they had a lot of fun doing that stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's just there's so many cool things in this game. Like, oh my god, it's awesome.
See, and that's what I like. People are excited to talk about their game. So yeah, as we wrap this up, is there anything that you think people who are on the fence about trying Cross Blitz, they've seen it, obviously it's popped up on Steam Next Fest on their storefronts at the time, demo's still available until July 10th. What would be something that you want them to know about that we might not have already covered?
Sure, yeah, I think we covered quite a bit, but it's just like, go play it. Like all of this stuff is just a culmination of like my childhood wonder, creativity. Like, it's good, it's a really good game, it's really polished. Like, a lot of work has gone into it. I think people that like any type of RPG or any type of card game, they're gonna love this. It's not your like run of the mill. It's not like just thrown in, right? It's like, it's good. It's a good card game.
Where can everybody find out more information and follow along as development continues?
Discord would be our main hub of just information. I mean, I'll throw in cards to the chat that I've already changed. Like, people are super interested in the balance changes and stuff. I'll throw them in. I'll give updates constantly. Definitely check out that, and then obviously download the game from Steam, and then follow our Twitter. But yeah,
And-
those are like the main sources of knowledge.
And everything will be linked in the description below and on insidergaming.com. Tom, I want to thank you so much for taking the time
Thanks,
to join
Mike.
this.
This is awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun. I love talking about these games. I love card building games. There's certain things like that I get to cover now of games that I've always loved since I was a kid, or the game styles. So to see it continue, it puts a smile on my face. And like we talked about before, it gives me things to enjoy.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.